Hello and welcome to anybody who is watching or listening to this on whatever platform you may be on. I'll be able to see comments on if you're leaving comments or questions or anything like that on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch or X. I should be able to see them all here on my little console on StreamYard. And I guess you know who I am, or you wouldn't be tuning in, but I'm David Rovix. I'm a singer-songwriter and writer of other things as well. And I first went to both Israel and the occupied West Bank in 1999, and then again in 2005. And I've been in some way or another involved with the Palestinian struggle, at least in the capacity as a musician and popular educator for the past 23 years or so. And so if anybody has any questions or comments, I'll be looking out for them. Otherwise, I will just be trying to give some kind of an impression of what the heck is going on. If you're watching the American mainstream media, then you would not have any real idea of what's happening now or what's been happening for a very long time in Palestine or in Israel. So you know, I don't know who needs what kind of education or information, but what's happening right now is a genocidal bombing campaign carried out by the Israeli military of the very small occupied, besieged, walled ghetto called the Gaza Strip. I've written a lot of essays about this background and what's going on as well. You can find them at davidrovix.com/Palestine, and also on Substack and Counterpunch with some of them. And this is a song I just wrote very recently, like yesterday. Hear the drones above your head. What were the last words that she said before she joined the thousands dead as the bombs rain down? See the fire in the sky, hear all of the children cry. The tower falls from way on high as the bombs rain down. See the dust rise everywhere. Once it was a building there, then it crashed down from the air as the bombs rain down. Twisted bodies all around, the never-ending buzzing sound, the earthquake shaking all the ground as the bombs rain down. Shattered camps of refugees, necklaces of ancient keys, smell the burning olive trees as the bombs rain down. See the homes, apartment blocks, see the mosques reduced to rocks, feel the awe and feel the shock as the bombs rain down. See the sewage in the street, mixed with blood beneath your feet, before the sonic boom repeats as the bombs rain down. See the darkness of the night, no power for the lights, but the explosions are so bright as the bombs rain down. Nothing left but rubble strewn, nothing rising but the moon, but the next one's coming soon as the bombs rain down. Hear the politicians say there's nothing here to see today. We're punishing Hamas this way as the bombs rain down. Hear the drones above your head. What were the last words that she said before she joined the thousands dead as the bombs rain down? Let's see where to even start. So what's going on is a genocidal bombing campaign in response to a rebellion of half starving people living in a walled ghetto with no clean water, no access to construction materials, and very little food. Many people think it's ironic that the people who are carrying out this genocidal bombing campaign are descended from, in many cases, folks who were who survived the Holocaust, and or descended from folks who were killed in the Holocaust, the Nazi Holocaust in Europe, in which so many millions of Jews and Roma and communists and Russians and others were killed. And it's worth maybe going back a bit and talking about that history, because Israel is a settler colonial project from the beginning that has its origins with the Zionist movement in the 1890s, but most especially when it started going anywhere was after the end of World War I, when the entire Middle East and much of Africa and so much of the rest of the world was divided up by the victorious powers to their benefit, with all sorts of borders that still cause all kinds of problems today in so many different countries. And that was all intentional on the part of the colonists to do that, to make sure that there would be great difficulty in many countries having any kind of a strong government, because they'd be kind of having this endemic problem with intentional divisions within the artificial borders of many countries that the colonial powers imposed on the defeated Ottoman Empire and other defeated parties in that war, in the First World War. And the Zionist movement was not especially popular and at the time, and didn't really gain great popularity until the period during which Hitler rose to power in Europe. And a lot of Jews were trying to get out, and they weren't able to go to the places they wanted to go, like the United States, Canada, Cuba. All of those places were not allowing immigration from that whole part of Europe, whether they were Jewish or other people from Central, Eastern, or Southern Europe. They were all barred from emigrating to the U.S. From the early 20s until 1944. So loads of Jews who wanted to come to New York, including lots of folks I actually personally know from who are now dead, but that I knew when they were alive. They wanted to come to New York, but they ended up going to South America or to Palestine because that's where they could get a visa to get out of Europe. And then eventually they ended up in New York, which is why I knew them, because that's where I'm from. But when they were trying to get to New York in 1939 on a ship called the MS St. Louis that took off from Hamburg, Germany, they were denied entry to the U.S., then to Canada, then to Cuba, and or maybe it was Cuba first, I can't remember. But anyway, they were denied entry to all three countries, and then they went back to Europe, and so many of them died. I can't remember the percentage, but a lot of them died in the next couple of years, being occupied by the Nazis. And this is a song that is very sort of uncomfortably, for me, popular among a lot of Nazis. But can't do much about that sort of thing, because it's just they know it. They're being funny, I guess. But it's supposed to be. What I'm doing here is quoting the actual papers of the day. So if you agree with them, then that's. If you agree with the racist papers of the Times, then that's not my problem. It's 1939 and the boats are coming, but we can't have them here. That much at least is clear. Our economy is poor. We can't just open up the door. We've got problems of our own. They should just leave us alone. They're a tribalistic race. They keep a separate space. They don't really integrate. They'll be a burden on the state. Watch before it is too late. It's 1939 and the boats are coming, but If we let them land and acquiesce to their demands, we'll soon be overrun, our Christian country will be done. They should just take the tram closer by to Amsterdam, keep their problems in the region. This invading legion, enemies within our ranks, with names like Rosenberg and Frank, watch that water that you drank. It's 1939 and the boats are coming, but they must stay away. In the newspapers they say they don't believe in Christ the Lord, and they're jumping overboard, crossing borders in a swarm. They'll never be reformed. It's a Trojan horse attack, and we've got to send them back. There may be Nazis in the hall, answering Hitler's call. These Jews are Germans after all. It's 1939 and the boats are coming. Turned down the vocals a little. That was feeding back, it looked like. Let's see. The question here on one of these platforms in my feed here. And by the way, if anybody has any comments or questions on whatever platform you're watching on, I can see them on my little StreamYard feed where they all get put together for my benefit. And one is about my comments on Israel saying they're turning water energy back on in Palestine hours after Iran threatened to intervene if Israel continues doing what they're doing. And I think it's a very interesting development that Iran is saying that they will intervene if things continue. It's I'd say a very positive development. Although, of course, World War III, it wouldn't be positive, but the world can't just stand by while this is going on either, can it? And but also Blinken conveniently at the same time as Iran made the statement they made to Al Jazeera just a few hours ago. At the same time, also Blinken told the Israelis to turn the water on for folks in southern Gaza. So those things happen at the same time. So I don't know, and I don't know if as of 20 minutes ago, last time I checked, Israel had not complied and had not started deliveries of water. So and once they do, they're going to be in a big tank, and then they're going to need to get distributed, and they're actively bombing southern Gaza as well as northern Gaza right now, as they're telling everybody to leave and go to southern Gaza. This is the Nakba. That was another question from Ella about could you explain the Nakba? Well, what's happening right now is a new Nakba. And the Nakba, which is what Arabic for the catastrophe, and the Nakba is what the Israelis call Independence Day. But for the Palestinian population, which had been living there for ever, it was a terrible catastrophe, because at least like over 700,000, whatever it is, I don't even know if anybody knows the real numbers, but the number you hear most is 750,000 Palestinians who, out of fear of massacres at the point of a gun, and perhaps also in some cases because they hoped that a liberation war led by Arab armies would bring them back to their homes if they fled first. A lot of people had a lot of different motivations for leaving, but certainly fear was primary among them, with the Israelis launching their so-called independence war. And so the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians fled their land and went to the West Bank, Gaza, and also neighboring countries like Jordan and Syria, Lebanon. And in the vast majority of cases, they have never been allowed by the Israelis to come back. I think something like 10,000 of them were allowed back in. Vast majority were never allowed back in, so they to this day live in multi-generational refugee camps in all of the neighboring countries, and many millions more in the Palestinian diaspora who left the refugee camps and went to somewhere else like the U.S. or wherever, Canada, the UK, or any number of other places which have large Palestinian populations, including most of the Gulf countries, which where Palestinians, at least last I checked, this may be old information, but at one point Palestinians made up a very, very large proportion of the sort of managerial class in the Gulf states. Palestinians tend to be very well educated. Fascinating parallels there between Palestinians and historically Jews who are also homeless in this diaspora situation. Although the Palestinians are in that situation because of oppressors who are Jewish. Although it's very, very important to understand the context here that they are the oppressors in their case are Jewish, but they are completely facilitated by the great powers of the West, particularly by the United States, and this has been the case since the inception of the State of Israel. So it's there's this. It's all great power politics involved with them, Israel having a state and Palestine, the Palestinians never having gotten a state. The Canadian, somebody's mentioning the Canadian Prime Minister at the time being a friend of Hitler had anything to do with the Jews being turned away from Canada. Yeah, that they're. I don't know specifically about the Canadian Prime Minister at the time, but the National Socialist movement was very popular throughout the West, and including in the U.S. and Canada. And anti-Semitism was also very popular, and also just generally prejudice against Central, Eastern, and Southern Europeans. In Canada, they interned Italians during the war. Just like the U.S. interned Japanese Americans and Japanese nationals during the war. And so there's so originally through outright sort of legal processes, purchases, that sort of thing. There were like 7% of Palestinian land was in Jewish hands at the time of the Independence War, and then that went from 7 to 78%, which is what it was until 1967. At which point, after the war, another one of several wars to try to do something about this unjust situation that the UN and the rest of the world wasn't doing anything about. That there were the 1967 war and the 1973 war, which were took a lot of lives, and also especially 73 was a massive thing involving huge numbers of deaths and planes shot down and all kinds of stuff. But Israel won those wars. I mean, depending on who you ask. They got. Egypt got the Sinai back, so and there was a peace treaty and stuff. So actually, if you ask a lot of Egyptians, they won the war. So it's very much interesting, different perspectives depending on whose history, whose version of history. But things have been going downhill for Palestinians ever since, and the peace deal, the treaty, the Oslo Accords have never been anything that has helped. It's just it may have slowed down everything going to hell at some point, but it's the Palestinians have been losing more and more land since 67, since 48, really, and that process just continues. And so now 92% of historic Palestine is not occupied by, or is owned, occupied, controlled by Israel, either under martial law or civilian law, depending on who's living there. And 8% is Palestinian land, but that land is also controlled in terms of who goes in and out by Israeli checkpoints everywhere. So the West Bank, the occupied West Bank, is just a patchwork of little Bantustans with Israeli checkpoints. And right now, since last Saturday, nobody can go in or out of any town in the West Bank. The Israeli authorities have them completely locked down, and there's been, I can't remember how many, I think now hundreds in the past week in the West Bank killed by Israeli military and settlers who have been increasingly going on pogroms in recent years, backed up by troops where Palestinians are killed, civilians are killed, and houses and cars are destroyed and burned down. This has been become a regular feature of life in the occupied West Bank in recent years under the far-right Israeli government that's been in power there for some years now. And so, yeah, that's, bottom line, especially when, things are happening that are attracting interest from folks, suddenly, the news is sort of a little bit covering what's going on around Gaza and Israel and stuff like that. Then, they always portray it as, Hamas launched rockets. It always started with Hamas launching rockets, and nothing starts with Hamas launching anything. Nothing starts with Hamas launching an operation, because Hamas is just the closest thing to the occupied, walled, besieged ghetto has to an authority. I mean, this is not an army. They don't have tanks. They don't have planes. They don't have anything. They don't have an airport. It's just, this isn't a war between countries. This is a ghetto uprising, and it's a fascinating connection there, because what we were talking about is, and once again, people will say this is ironic, and let's just talk about that for a moment. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising is widely believed, certainly until this week, to be one of the more impressive urban uprisings in history, and it began on April 19th, 1943, and it went on for 4 weeks, really, and during which time the entire Warsaw Ghetto was destroyed by fire by the Nazis. And the Warsaw Ghetto was where what had been a population of 500,000 Jews in Warsaw were by 1940 something or two or so were forced all living in the Warsaw Ghetto, which had about 60,000 Jews in it, and a very interesting similar situation with a walled ghetto where the inhabitants were being starved, and had access to nothing, no weapons, only homemade weapons. And they organized first to clean the ghetto up of any collaborators, which involved killing a lot of people, and then to organize this completely surprise uprising that the Nazis had no idea was about to happen. And even with homemade weapons, they fought the Nazis for 4 weeks. The Nazis had to get troops to come from the Russian front to help them out there in Warsaw. And at one point, the ghetto fighters actually broke out of their walled ghetto and were fighting in the city of Warsaw beyond the ghetto. Which shocked the Nazis, and all that. So fascinating parallels here. And as with the Hamas fighters who broke out of their walled ghetto, they clearly all were expecting to die. And they referred to each other as the Walking Dead, as I'm quite certain the folks involved today with these kinds of operations also use such terms to, because they know what they're doing, and they're risking their lives and losing them, and of course, doing terrible things in the process. Taking other lives, which is how this whole cycle of violence thing works. I'll do another song. I wrote this after 9/11. Life could have been different. You think I don't know? Could have been born in Paris or in the Wisconsin snow. But I'm from this desert, here I will stand, and I will meet you in the promised land. You know, I went to college to be an engineer. Thought I'd do something useful. What good is that here? When your jet fighters bomb any buildings that stand, I will meet you in the promised land. So, life of the fighter, I didn't choose, but I love my people, and I can follow your cues. If destroying our world is your leader's command, I will meet you in the promised land. My name is Mohammed, but I don't know if it's true. If we go any place better when our life here is through. But you've butchered my family, you must understand. I will meet you in the promised land. I know it's not pretty, but for all that you've done, for all the widows and orphans, for all the wars that you've won, I must teach you a lesson. Maybe you'll understand. I will meet you in the promised land. So I will get in this plane, and when it's in the air, to your symbols of power and our source of despair, I'll look through the cockpit, steady my hand. I will meet you in the promised land. I will meet you in the promised land. I will meet you in the promised land. So, Ella writes, curious what I think the outcome will be. And I've never actually read Jean-Paul Sartre, but and I should, I'm sure. But apparently, one of the sayings he's known for is that football is endlessly complicated by the existence of the opposing team. So I have no idea. I don't run the world, and nobody else does either. Let's see here. The U.S. just thinks they do. But as Mao Zedong said, the U.S. is a paper tiger, but it has nuclear teeth. This song used to be played on BBC every month or so for years. BBC Radio 3, until Andy Kershaw lost his job. Child, what will you remember when you recall your 16th year? The horrid sound of helicopter gunships, the rumble of the tanks as they drew near, as the world went about its business, and I burned another tank of gasoline. The Dow Jones lost a couple points that day while you were crying in the city of Jenin. Did they even give your parents warning before they blew the windows out with shells? While you hid inside the high school basement amidst the ringing of church bells, as you watched your teacher crumple by the doorway, and in England they were toasting to the Queen. You were so far from the thoughts of so many, huddled in the city of Jenin. Were you thinking of the taunting of the soldiers, or of the shit they smeared upon the walls? Were you thinking of your cousin after torture, or Tel Aviv and its glittering shopping malls? When the fat men in their mansions say that you don't want peace, did you wonder what they mean? As you sat amidst the stench inside the darkness in the shattered city of Jenin. What went through your mind on that day at the sight of your mother's vacant eyes, as she lay still among the rubble beneath the blue Middle Eastern skies, as you stood upon this bulldozed building beside the settlements and their hills so green, as your tears gave way to grim determination amidst the ruins of the city of Jenin? And why should anybody wonder, as you stepped on board the crowded bus across the green line, and you reached inside your jacket for the cord? Were you thinking of your neighbors' buried bodies as you made the stage for this scene, as you set off the explosives that were strapped around your waist? Were you thinking of the city of Jenin? It's this idea that you can bomb a place and find peace that way is just completely madness. It only works if you're going to kill everybody. And the Israelis know that. You look at all the 400,000 civilians killed in the U.S.'s so-called war on terror since the turn of this century in Afghanistan, Iraq, and elsewhere. And now if Afghanistan is run by the Taliban and Iraq is run by a government that is friendly with the U.S.'s sworn enemy, Iran. And this is after 400,000 civilian deaths, several thousand U.S. soldiers dead, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of U.S. soldiers traumatized for life, along with the entire population of several countries. But then our great progressive drone warrior, Barack Obama, was in the White House when the nemesis of of the U.S. and all of humanity, apparently, was killed. The most popular person to write outlaw ballads about in Mexico in 2001 was killed. And nothing changed, did it? It was a commando operation of courage and skill. Navy SEAL helicopters flew in for the kill. They had a firefight, and they shot him in the head. Now the mastermind of terror, Bin Laden, is dead. For all those who love freedom, it's a glorious day. You see in New York, they're chanting USA. Fatherless children clutching teddy bears. Legless veterans with catheters and wheelchairs can all rejoice that the deed is done, and the war on terror has been won. Of Afghanistan can look at the skies. They can fill the air with joyful cries as the call to prayer rings from shattered homes. They can all run out from the rubble of their homes. Now they know their parents didn't die in vain when they heard the roar of a jet plane. Now the whole village except the 115 who died one morning unknown and unseen can all rejoice that the deed is done, and the war on terror has been won. Now folks can have a party in old Baghdad, and the people of Fallujah can all be glad. Now they know there is a reason for their poisoned farms and for the babies born without heads or arms. The widows need not wonder where their husbands went. They can look forward to the future in their tents. Now all the refugees, whatever country they're in Syria, Jordan, or Michigan, can all rejoice that the deed is done, and the war on terror has been won. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Good night, Armin, in Germany. Sleep good, I hope. Let's see. Not that this is very good bedtime music, really. So, it was very heartening to see how many people are coming out to protest in London and Berlin and Yemen and Iran and so many other places. This, this stuff is so repetitive. When there were people talking about, when Palestinians were once again taking refuge in large numbers in UN compounds and UN-run schools under the belief that maybe they're a little safer there than they are in their homes. Once again, as hopefully people are aware, most of the UN facilities in Gaza have been bombed once again. And this is not new. This is what the Israelis do all the time. But it's like every time a new war starts, the folks at the UN, maybe because they feel like they have to, and the Western media just talks as if, of course, they're not going to bomb a UN compound, but they've been bombing UN compounds, schools, elementary schools, hospitals, mosques. This is all intentional and very intentional. These are smart bombs. They're targeted. They know the map of Gaza. It's not that big. They got it all mapped out. They know exactly where they're bombing. It is a war crime to bomb a school or a hospital or an apartment complex just because there's a couple of so-called terrorists in it. That's a war crime. That is not, allowed under the so-called rules of war that nobody, pays much attention to. But just as a bit of an illustration that this is not new, I'll do a song I wrote in 2014 when Israel was once again bombing Gaza. And they killed like 2,000 people then, and apparently there was nothing compared to what they're doing now. But one of the things that's so harrowing about watching these bombs destroying these buildings is that, Gaza, it's 2.2 million people living in an area 5 miles by 25 miles, and they're mostly living in high rises because that's what you do when you got that many people. And they're taking them down. They're collapsing. Just like the Twin Towers. Just like the Twin Towers. Just like the Twin Towers. I heard them marching, chanting, "Kill them all." I saw millions of people trapped behind ghetto walls. I saw the soldiers shooting every Friday afternoon. I saw some exposed to sickness, with others made immune. I saw the tear gas in Al-Aqsa, eyes open wide. I saw the mob attack the motorist and beat him till he died. I heard the generals lying. I saw the tanks moving in. I heard the settlers shouting, "Let the killing begin." Look up above, hear the ear-splitting sound. Watch the buildings crumble to the ground. See the planes in the sky there by the sea, so much like New York City. I heard the wailing voices of the dying and forlorn, of the kids who couldn't get out, and those who weren't warned. I saw all the schools and hospitals in pieces there still, from the last time the IOF came to maim and kill. I saw the brave children with piles of rocks facing tanks demolishing city blocks. What's left of the grove but some sap as they try to wipe Palestine off the map. Look up above, hear the ear-splitting sound. Watch the buildings crumble to the ground. See the planes in the sky there by the sea, so much like New York City. I heard the DNC, and all the Republicans too, pledge allegiance to Netanyahu. I heard the president start the story with rockets from a ghetto where people live in rubble, starved by an embargo. I saw a whole lot of crocodile tears on display for the zillionth time. I heard politicians say, "Can both sides please de-escalate?" On one side are the occupied, on the other an apartheid state. Look up above, hear the ear-splitting sound. Watch the buildings crumble to the ground. See the planes in the sky there by the sea, so much like New York City. I heard them marching, chanting, "Kill them all." I saw millions of people trapped behind ghetto walls. Yeah, Ella, you're commenting about the 4 people who were just massacred, who were trying to surrender. Yes, that just happened, didn't it? That's right. So, Lebanon is this is also going on with on the border with Lebanon. There's a lot happening, not that much compared to 2006. And who knows what's coming with Lebanon, but I was in Lebanon in 2005 and having a wonderful tour of the country, and a lot of the places I visited in 2005 were destroyed the following year, along with tens of thousands. I don't know how many buildings, hundreds of thousands. I can't remember the numbers I used to know. It's been a while. 2 soldiers had been captured. They'd crossed to the other side. 2 soldiers taken prisoner, several others died. This is how it started, so said the Jewish state. Forget about 96, 82, 67, 48. 2 soldiers taken hostage, and by the Sea of Galilee, we must defend our borders wherever they may be. We must defend our soldiers wherever they're deployed. 2 of them are captured, 1 country is destroyed. Somewhere in Tel Aviv, generals drawing battle lines for the town where Jesus turned water into wine. On the 10-year anniversary of a massacre of children, they thought it was a good idea to massacre some children. Anyone in the South, I heard Ehud Olmert say, everyone's a target and may be killed today, and if your home has turned to rubble, it may be pulverized some more, because 2 soldiers have been captured, and we got to settle up the score. 100,000 homes, there it is, leveled to the ground. Every olive branch on offer burned where it was found. Every chance at dialogue rejected right on cue. If you're going to burn your bridges, you might as well bomb them too. They even bombed the prison where they used to torture fighters, where they had the dogs and leashes, cigarettes and lighters, where they were kept and shackled, not allowed to stand, where they torched the forests, turned them into sand. And the entire world watches. A few thousand demonstrate. Governments take action, all too little or too late. All the telephones are ringing in case you couldn't read the signs. This is the IDF, and you're in the firing line. Condoleezza came to visit for about an hour. She thought it was a party, some kind of baby shower. She said these were the birth pangs of a brand new morn. But in the hospitals today, all the babies were stillborn. The stars and stripes among the ruins say where they were made, in case anybody wonders about all that military aid, in case anybody wonders about the mines around the farms, or why so many toddlers are missing legs and arms, or why so many of them ask exactly what was meant by wiping out their homes and then giving them a tent, or why if you ask them, who is Nasrallah, they'll tell you, he's our leader, and we all are Hezbollah. Oh, and thanks for the correction, Don. I wrote that song, Watch the Buildings Crumble, in 2021, totally not 2014. I wrote another song in 2014 with, unfortunately, the very similar chord progression and same subject material, which Ben Grosscup has been doing a brilliant rendition of at various protests in Massachusetts recently. If anybody's in Massachusetts, look up Ben and find out where the next protest is happening. Let's see. And if you're in Portland or anywhere around here and you're having a protest that you want me to sing at, I'm available. Last I heard, there was one small vigil, and it didn't look like they had a sound system. But I'm available. And I wish I were in London. Back in, when was it? 2010? 2009. There was a trial. There were a couple of trials. Eventually, they railroaded these folks into prison. They ran a foundation that was shut down by the U.S. government called the Holy Land Foundation. They grew up among the bombs of occupation, bulldozed houses, the situation. refugee camps, Khan Yunis and Shatila, children gunned down in the Intifada, poverty, hunger, a place to slowly die. 5 men decided they had to try. From their homes in Texas to the stateless nation, they started up the Holy Land Foundation. They sent food and medicine, that's all they ever did. They sent toys for little kids. Feed the hungry, that's a good deal, but it depends on who you want to feed. If they're living in the ghettos under IOF command, they don't want to starve in their homeland. If Sharon says all that's theirs is mine, if they're from a place called Palestine, the Holy Land is crying out, leaving little room for doubt. From ruined homes, the kids ask you, what in the world will you do? They sent money to the Zakat committees, the same ones funded by USAID, but these were Arabs aiding Palestinians. A very hard time to meet Muslims. Their phones were tapped. Nothing could be found with an executive order. Bush shut them down, freezing all their funds, taking food from kids. That's what the USA did. They support Hamas, it was proclaimed, though they couldn't find a cent sent in their name, but they had evidence in court. An anonymous Israeli submitted a report behind a veil. No cross-examination. He could smell Hamas was his explanation. First the jury hung, so they tried them again, and from feeding hungry people they were sent to prison. The Holy Land is crying out, leaving little room for doubt. From ruined homes, the kids ask you, what in the world will you do? 5 men in cells, no one knows what's for. Every Muslim an unindicted co-conspirator. Be careful what you say, be wary what you hear, or end up in a CMU for 65 years. Cut off from the world, held in a box. Back home kids get shot for throwing rocks. No one stops the charity sending money for tanks, for illegal settlements all over the West Bank. This is justice in America, didn't know it, now you do. A retrial was denied, I should mention that too. Retrial denied, who knows who's next to go to be tortured in a little Guantanamo. The Constitution suspended, they just haven't let us know. It's easier that way, just say it isn't so. The Holy Land Foundation, you know it's true. They just did what all of us should do. The Holy Land is crying out, leaving little room for doubt. From ruined homes, the kids ask you, what in the world will you do? Yeah, what was I thinking about now? Something. I kind of made a set list here. Let's see, what else do I have on there that I was thinking about doing? So, yeah, well, let's see. Do that. The Western media, especially the American media, but the Western media generally, is just completely dishonest, and you're not going to get anything real about what's going on. And the same is true about anything you hear about Iran. Did you hear that the guy from the Reagan election team in 1980 who negotiated with the new Iranian government to hold on to the hostages longer in order to swing the election in Reagan's favor, that guy just admitted, and he's like 98 years old, but he just admitted that he did that. Did you know that? Missile strikes in Baghdad, skies full of fighter jets, tension in the air, as thick as it gets. Their talking points are loaded, at each press conference with what passes for an effort at historical reference. They talk of things that happened over 40 years before, that they say now bring us to the edge of World War. They talk about the hostages, so let us now rewind. When the students took the embassy, just what did they find? When the students took the embassy, I was just a kid, but I remember well the first things they did. Let all the women go while collecting all the trash, all the shredded documents that weren't yet turned to ash, all the shredded documents that clearly showed the torture and corruption, how the power flowed. The concept of a captured state was one the Shah defined. When the students took the embassy, just what did they find? When the students took the embassy, they found the crimes of Savak, had the CIA hiding under every rock. And that's where they had been, where the agents were based. They had a staff of thousands there. From there they laid to waste the dreams held by so many for a free society, like the one they overthrew back in 1953. Historic crimes exposed in the shredder once consigned. When the students took the embassy, just what did they find? When the students took the embassy, Hill asks another good question. What do I think about Hamas having captives? I mean, I think it's terrible that anybody is ever held captive or killed, including soldiers. But, you know, we're talking about we're talking about people living in a besieged ghetto who are absolutely desperate. There's thousands of Palestinians, including many, many children, being held without charges indefinitely in Israeli prisons and tortured there. So under the circumstances, holding hostages in order to exchange them for prisoners makes a lot of sense. And it's worked before as well. When they had Gilad Shalit for years, one soldier, they traded him for 1,000 prisoners. So, I hope that Israel lets out all the prisoners. That they could easily get those hostages out of there. They just have to let out all the prisoners and stop besieging Gaza, which is what they should have done a long time ago anyway. People say it's complicated, but it's not. It's really not. And let's just taking the broad historical view here. First of all, in the Old Testament, there's all this stuff about returning to Israel, right? And but the reality of the situation is that's a colonial settler project. That's just an excuse. It had, the Zionist project existing, the Zionist movement existing, was very convenient for the people that wanted to colonize Palestine. Because defeating the Arab world has been a priority since the Crusades in Europe, and this is a nice opportunity to have a settler colonial regime, European-style colonial regime, where the people in charge are European Jews. Sounded like a great idea to a lot of European imperialist types, and after the World War I. So this is when this became more of a serious project, and a project of settlement and of dispossession of Palestinian land from Palestinian people, under the guise of all kinds of other stuff like terra nullius, the same usual colonial nonsense that they talk about. And so the basic situation is just so simple. People want to go home. People don't want to be refugees. People want to live in equality with their neighbors. It's very, very simple. It could be a very simple solution a long time ago. But, Steve, lovely to see you there. I want to read what you're saying here. Yeah. Saying our entire lives, the great threats to peace involve Israel. When I was young, I just asked why Israel was created where it is. I think I heard once that Nevada was considered, but we wouldn't take the Jews. Yeah. I think, that's been my plan, actually. I mean, no offense to all the, of course, then we're talking about stealing more indigenous land, but at least this land is already stolen. And I think in Nebraska, they could, be a lot more, Nevada, yeah, they could be a lot more, it would be a lot safer for them, I think, than where they are now. But they could be safe where they are now, too, if they would just stop running an apartheid state. But a friend of mine, Palestinian friend of mine, a long time ago, talked about leading a march, kind of actually happened 18 years later, but she was talking about leading a march kind of a lot like the Great March of Return, with the message from all the refugees coming from all over, the refugee camps all over the surrounding areas and within Palestine and outside of Palestine, with the simple message of people just saying, I want to go home. I was born a refugee, and I don't know if I'll ever see the old farmhouse I've heard about, but it's where I belong, there is no doubt, 'cause my whole family is from that farm. We never did nobody harm. If you're confused by what you've heard, let me boil it down to a single word. I want to go home. I want to go home. I have heard my grandpa say that on the street most every day the neighbors' kids would kick a ball with my dad when he was small. We were Christians, they were Jews, but it was no big deal. Religious views, so it was strange when at the point of a gun across the river we had to run. I want to go home. I want to go home. We had dipkick, we had songs, and we all knew where we belonged. We grew crops, life was good there in the land where Jesus stood. Now we're scattered everywhere, but there's no peace anywhere. And I'm just searching for some kind of sign, for some way back to Palestine. I want to go home. 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 Well, the Ella asks another really good question. What kind of solution would work? One state or two state? And for example, one state or two state. And it's like, I think sometimes, I don't have the answer necessarily, but but what I can say for sure is that sometimes when problems when certain parties continually keep on for generations making a problem worse and worse all the time, like the U.S. policy there has been making sure for decades and decades that the most far-right Israeli governments get all the most support, because the U.S. is just constantly sending military aid, which encourages military solutions. And the solution is not a military solution. And the U.S. is just pouring fuel on the fire and making it worse by constantly sending on all this military aid and giving all the political cover to this apartheid state called Israel. And, whatever solution, it actually lies, I would say, largely in the United States, in terms of stopping the fuel, to stop pouring fuel on the fire, and this is true of a lot of different situations in a lot of different countries. I mean, and it's not that the U.S. is the root of all the problems, but the U.S. is often fueling fires and making problems worse when they exist, and often creating them as well. But this practice has to end. But otherwise, if it's a one state or two state, I think either one of those kinds of solutions could potentially work just fine, if the U.S. were not constantly supporting the most fascistic elements within the Israeli establishment, which are now the elements that are actually running the country. So. And somebody, Canadian communist, the land belongs to them, and the idea that they need to take back the land. I mean, the land also here belongs to the Native Americans, and it's been occupied by Europeans and other folks for many hundreds of years. And there's a lot of just solutions to problems in the world that have absolutely nothing at all to do with anything remotely practical or actually, applicable. So justice is a great idea, but actually finding solutions that are workable, where we can actually live in peace with each other. And I think what that requires is equality, and people treated with respect, and people have access to basic rights and land, and, not being second-class citizens. And I think under those circumstances, white, black, Native American, and other folks can live together in North America, and also the same, Jews and Palestinians can live together in Israel and wherever. It's just, but not under these terribly unequal situations with the more than half the population. Literally, this is the situation. More than half of the people in historic Palestine who are Palestinians. Most of the people there are Palestinians. The majority of the population, if you put together Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza, the majority of the population are Palestinian. And most most of those Palestinians, all but the 1 million who are Israeli citizens, the rest of them, the other 4 million or so, are forced to live in occupied territories under military rule, and on what is 8% of their historic land. So this is the kind of it's really easily competitive with South Africa or any other kind of example historically. And of course, famously, Desmond Tutu and other veterans of the fight against apartheid in South Africa, upon touring in Palestine, said it's worse. It's worse there, and that was 20 years ago. But one of the most shocking things about all this, that it just we're so the Western media's bias is so completely exposed, as well as all the Western regimes, it's so obvious when you look at somebody, you can hear there's a speech going around from I guess it was just a year ago or so, of Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the EU Parliament, talking about how Russia is committing war crimes by not allowing Ukrainians access, by destroying electrical plants and not, allowing people to have access to electricity, and that's, they say, a war crime. Which it sounds like a good argument, but it's not even. They're not even talking about Israel committing war crimes. They're just talking about we need to stand with Israel, send them more arms, send them more, and fight against the terrorists. And the rhetoric is completely different, completely absent as any talk of war crimes or any of that. So it's the double standard is just completely completely laid bare, particularly by the convenience of the fact that we have this terrible war going on in Ukraine at the same time as this terrible war going on in Gaza. So, we can compare and contrast. They're happening at the same time. There are headlines in the press at the same time on the same day. And, one will be like, the brutal, savage Russian military is bombarding civilian structures in Ukraine, even if it's comparatively rare and accidental. It gets all the headlines. Not to minimize the suffering in Ukraine, but the Russian bombing is not as indiscriminate as the Israeli bombing of Gaza, and that's very clear. And if you don't think so, then you're watching the Western media too. But it's what they're doing, what the Israelis are doing in Gaza is completely indiscriminate destruction of civilian homes, mosques, schools, hospitals, etc. And that's evidenced by the fact that now we're up to almost 1,000 children who have been killed, and these are their victims. They are killing children, and but the double standard there with Ukraine and Israel is quite something. And I wrote this song originally, when the Ukraine war started, thinking about other places. They called us Nazis, said that we did not deserve to have sovereignty, that our independence was some kind of plot, and the skies rained down missiles and gunshots. They said we were against their civilization, against the existence of their nation, which apparently is found right where we're from, to where they and their weapons had come. We responded with a people's war. Everybody knew what a Molotov was for. The whole of our society mobilized to fight, while our people got slaughtered day and night. The invaders used every weapon ever known, as all of the evidence has shown. They killed us on the land and blockaded us at sea, and they say they only want to set us free. When the invader arrives, comes for your land, for your lives, comes to take it all from you, what do? Parents took their children, became refugees, living around the world in different countries, dreaming of the day they can go back to our cities under attack. Solidarity came from all around, everywhere, but the invaders didn't care. A situation anyone can understand. An occupying army on another people's land. When the invaders arrived, come for your land, for your lives, come to take it all from you. What do? People form networks and organizations, even a Bureau of the United Nations. Many governments sent aid, though under occupation. The pipers never paid, and the blood of the innocents flowed on the fields that they sowed. You can hear everybody saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. When the invader arrives, comes for your land, for your lives, comes to take it all from you, what do? I'm gonna, what did I have in mind? One other song now. Yeah, there's some, what was I going to talk about? Some other, oh yeah, I'll do that. It's been a pleasure singing these really depressing songs about really depressing subjects to you all on these platforms. And of course, it'll be all on line afterwards and up as a podcast, and you can share it with anybody that you want to. And if you live in Scandinavia, me and Kamala will be touring around there for the first half or so of next month of November. And info is on my website, and also davidrovics.com/Palestine. You can find everything, well, not everything, but some selected writings and recordings that I've made related to Palestine. And if you want to follow what's going on in Gaza, there's pros and cons to all the different media platforms, but I highly recommend Al Jazeera for seeing Al Jazeera English. You can follow what's going on the ground. They have reporters there. They actually, have Palestinian reporters reporting, including other folks who are in Gaza. And, unlike on NPR where I just heard somebody say, well, they won't let reporters in there. No, they won't let reporters in there, but they have reporters in there. But they don't trust Palestinian reporters. I'll do one more song, which is another song I wrote at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, as they say. Amid the lightning and thunder, those left alive, as long as they live, will wonder. Was there something that could have been done before nuclear winter blocked out the sun, after the earth that we once knew was blown asunder? At the end of World War III, any pundits who may still be found will have heated debates about how the end came round. Was it the Black Sea blockade when the rush for the end times was made, or the breaking of promises promised when the wall came down? At the end of World War III, as people look for clean water to drink, as they're dreaming of the days when they had a kitchen sink, wishing they could try again to talk to belligerent men, back when we were hanging on the brink. At the end of World War III, everyone has the same thought. Is this what imperial intransigence wrought? Life under occupation, or the end of creation? Decisions that decades of lost opportunities brought. At the end of World War III, with billions dead or dying, it won't matter who was right or who was lying. When civilization has ended, once the last warheads descended, only then will there be no one left denying. At the end of World War III, as the few left alive survey the rubble remaining, wondering how long they'll survive, too late to question the story of expansion or conquest or glory. No time to rewind from the date Armageddon arrived. At the end of World War III, Thanks for listening, everybody. Free Palestine.